everyone, it's Angela and welcome to my channel. Please be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share the video. Also click the notifications bell so you will know whenever I upload any new content. So let's get into it. Social media was in an uproar when 34-year-old Damon George posted pictures with 24 of his 33 children. Oh my goodness. Many commented on how they felt that he was selfish and irresponsible for producing more children than he had the means to provide for. So Damon George posted a video response, and he was sounding off at his critics, including the baby mamas of 9 of the children who missed the photo shoot. He told all who were criticizing him to go and basically do themselves, while also defending his decision to have so many children. Many of those voicing their concerns touched on the issues surrounding the care of so many children, including the cost, also the psychological implications of not spending enough time with each child, and the number of broken homes that have been created. However, there was not much spoken about the biological impact of one man having so many children with different women on a grand scale. And that impact is gene pool shrinkage. In upcoming videos, I will also explore the economic impact of polygamy, along with the social and political concerns. But for right now, we will focus on the gene pool shrinkage, which can technically be referred to as a genetic drift, or more specifically, the bottleneck effect. So in today's video, we will compare polygamy with monogamy and see the impact of each practice on the gene pool. So let's go there. Let's get into it. Couple of disclaimers. I'll just leave it up for you to read this brief paragraph. Okay, you can pause the video if you need to and read the paragraph in full. But for those of you who are still here, thank you, and let's continue. First things first, you will see color-coded people throughout this video, which represents each person's DNA. The larger men and women represent husbands and wives, fathers and mothers, and so forth. Meanwhile, the smaller versions represent their children. So in this example, the husband, who's also the children's father, is red, while the wife, who's also the children's mother, is blue. Next to the husband and wife are their 2 children, a boy and a girl, who are each a combination of the red and blue colors from their parents. You will continue to see this pattern throughout this video, okay? Another thing that you should know is that the human birth ratio has a 1-to-1 rate. This is pertinent because up until the 1960s, the human birth ratio was approximately 1 boy to 1 girl. However, in the 1960s, around that time, sonogram technology allowed parents to see the gender of their child prior to birth. Many cultures on the planet prefer the birth of sons over daughters. So whenever the pregnancy was shown to be a girl, in some cases, some parents would either choose to have an abortion, or more often than not, when the child was born and discovered to be a girl, they would commit female infanticide. So now, as a result, there is currently an overpopulation of males on the planet. However, for the sake of simplicity in this video, we will keep the birth rate ratio here as 1 boy to 1 girl to reflect the natural and unaltered birth ratios, okay? So let's move ahead. Okay, in this example of color-coded people, there are a total of 50 people represented, 25 each of men and women, paired together as 25 couples. The different colors that you see within this picture represents everyone's genetic makeup, which is unique. Okay, as you can see, the colors from one person to the next are very diverse, which means that most of the men and women in this population are not closely related to each other. This means that they can mate with one another without the consequences of inbreeding, such as some of the physical and cognitive deficiencies that come as a result of it. Okay? So in this representation of a monogamous culture, each man has 25 women to choose from, but he can only marry one. Each woman has 25 men to choose from, but she can only marry one. So there is more genetic variety, or more gene pools, so to speak, for each person to fish from, if that makes sense. So let's simplify this presentation a little bit. And let's take a look at the first 10 couples represented here. And let's assume that they are all in monogamous marriages. As you can see, there are different colors which represent genetic diversity. Okay, so let's fast forward a couple of years, and each couple has hypothetically given birth to a boy and a girl. So you will find our first red and blue couple in this picture with their children. And also there are many other diverse families as well. So let's give each of these families a name to make it easier to keep track of them. So we have the A's and the B's and the C's and the, D's family, etc. Now let's envision that these children will go to school from kindergarten to 12th grade, and then we're going to fast forward a little bit. They will attend college, they'll graduate, and then we're going to fast forward some more. They begin their careers, and let's fast forward one more time. Now they are young adults between their mid-20s and early 30s, typically around the age and stage of life that many young adults who want to be married are seriously looking for spouses. Okay, so let's take a look at the now young adults as siblings so that you can have a reference point to see how they are related according to their color coding. Okay, now let's also add their family letters / names to make it easier to keep track of each person's DNA. Okay, and we're going to move forward a little bit. And let's see what it looks like when the adults of the second generation get married and now have spouses. And let's pause right here for a moment. See how they are paired? You see Mr. A with Miss I. You see Miss C with Mr. J. You see that there are so many variations of colors in this population, plenty of genetic diversity. And this scenario plays out on a much larger scale. So let's go even further. The second generation, they marry, they have their children. And now we're looking at the third generation. We see now that the children of these couples have a different texture to themselves than their parents. This represents what happens when a community is highly insulated, such as what you will find in small towns or some communities like the Amish or like the Gullah, who are located on the seacoast islands of South Carolina and Georgia. Although they are typically monogamous communities, they would have to be sure to know the genealogy of their potential partners so they can eliminate the chance of inbreeding. However, the community would still be genetically diverse enough to enable everyone to find a spouse who is not closely related to them from within. Okay, and this goes on and on. So possibly by the fourth generation, that's when they would have to begin to migrate out a little bit more. But even then, they may still be able to find people who are genetically diverse enough to marry. So, and this goes on. So now you have a brief representation of genetic diversity within a monogamous population. You see how monogamy ensures that the population remains genetically diverse and therefore highly capable of producing healthy offspring. Now let's move ahead and let's take a look at polygamy. When most people think of polygamy, they're usually referring to polygyny, which is the practice of one man who is in a plural marriage with multiple women. So let's begin as before. This is a representation of 50 people, 25 men and 25 women. So let's imagine that this is a community who voted to accept polygamy as a lifestyle, and they are the first generation. Okay. The first thing that you will notice, just as before, is that there are currently an even number of men and women. I mentioned earlier about the natural one girl to one boy human birth ratio. So if the people in this setting suddenly decide that they will have polygamous relationships, the first obstacle they will encounter will be a bride shortage. And let's see how that happens. First, some of the women will disagree with this lifestyle and migrate away from the community. So let's take away 5 women from the population. Now you see they're over here looking sort of different from the rest of the people. They've been shunned, so they have a shadow on themselves. And they, in return, are also giving everyone the side eye because, they're like, no, this isn't for me. So for the sake of simplicity, we will say that this community now believes that a man needs to have at least 4 wives in order to be considered normal. So if 4 wives is the norm, the next thing that you will notice is that there are not enough women in this community for every man to have 4 wives each. And this is especially true since some of the women have migrated away. Now, let's entertain for a moment that even if everyone in this example agreed to the practice of polygamy, and the 5 women who left previously instead stayed and became sister wives, there would still be a shortage of women. This is because in order for each of the men in this example to have 4 wives, there would have initially needed to be at least 100 women in this community to start with. So simple math here, 25 men times 4 wives each equals a need for at least 100 women. But remember, the human birth ratio is approximately 1 girl for every 1 boy. And unless you can go to a machine somewhere and manufacture biological human women, then there will be a crisis. So as a result, many of the men migrate away, which is represented by the scribbled effect of their silhouettes. Either they're migrating away because they're disillusioned, or they outright just agree with the practice, or they're migrating away to search for their 4 wives. Despite most of the men leaving in this community, the remaining women believe that they should be sister wifed up and decide to stay and make a way. So now here we are, we have this ratio of 4 women to every man. So let's take a brief look at the monogamous population for comparison's sake and how it appears. And as you see, there is a mate for each person, 1 man for each woman. Now let's see what it looks like when most of the men are gone. Now here's the polygamous population, where 1 man has many women that exclusively mates with him. The first thing that you will notice is that the proportion of men to women is very low in this sample. There are 5 men here who each have 4 women to mate with. You also notice there are not as many color-coded people in this example, which means that the genetic diversity of this population has been severely reduced. What you are seeing right now is a form of genetic drift. So let's get technical for a minute. Anytime the genetics of a population is affected, either as an increase to the gene pool or, as you are seeing right now, a decrease to it, it is called a genetic drift. Now, there are different types of genetic drifts, okay? The particular type of genetic drift that occurs with polygyny is known as the bottleneck effect. The type of bottleneck effect that most people are familiar with is in a traffic setting. So let's look at this. If you look at this diagram from left to right, you can see that 3 lanes of traffic are being reduced down to 2 lanes, and then finally down to 1 lane, where only 1 car at a time can pass through. So from a genetic perspective, the bottleneck effect occurs when the people in the gene pool are eliminated. Okay? People are eliminated from the gene pool due to natural disasters or war or polygyny. In terms of polygyny, the number of males in the population who are actually able to pass on their genetics is severely reduced, which produces results that are similar to a war or a natural disaster. So, okay, let's take a brief look at the 10 monogamous alphabet families. Do you see the different colors and their genetic diversity? Okay. Now let's return to the polygynous community. Let's go back to what it looks like for the 5 men and the 20 women who decided to have a plural marriage. Now let's match up all the women to their shared husbands. And let's give them an identity based on numbers to, help keep everything organized. So you have the families, they're named numbers 1 through 5. And bear in mind, each color combination represents the individual's DNA contribution. So just like with the monogamous community, let's fast forward a couple of years, and now the men have a child by each wife. And here's the second polygynous generation. Now, in this description, to keep it simple, the body of each child carries the color or the DNA contribution of the father, and the color of their heads represent their mother's DNA contribution. So let's assume that all of the children, boys and girls alike, will attend school from kindergarten to 12th grade and then go to college like their monogamous counterparts. They graduate college, work on their careers, and now they too are in their mid-20s to early 30s, and they are contemplating marriage. And let's just say that each child born into this polygynous community are saying, hey, I love my community, but I don't want to be polygynous. I want to be monogamous. Even if they did that, there will be a dilemma. Because the first thing that you'll observe here is that there's not much variety. That means the pickings are kind of slim, So let's revisit the second generation of the monogamous community. And you can see that when the children became adults, there were plenty of mates, based on the variety of colors. There were plenty of mates to choose from, and the gene pool was very diverse, as represented by the diversity of the colors. However, in the polygynous population, even if the children decided to tread a different path than their parents and become monogamous, they will still hit some crisis. Now, remember that in these examples, you cannot have a pairing of the same color code because to do so would symbolize inbreeding. The first crisis would be that multiple siblings of one family will also be marrying multiple siblings of other families. That is if they want to keep their community intact. Otherwise, for the sake of genetic diversity, most of them will need to migrate. So let's go a little bit further and say that everyone in this example, in the second generation, they said, that's it. I'm not going to be polygamous like my father and like my mother's. What I'm going to do is be monogamous, and we're going to stay here in this community. We're going to be monogamous and live in our hometown. So that's what they do. They go ahead, they get married, each of them monogamously. Well, they're going to hit another crisis, and it will show up when the second generation, even though they're married monogamously, give birth to the third generation. Because see, where in the monogamous population, by the third generation, there may be a handful of individuals that are closely related, and they may have to watch the genealogy a little bit. And this is like if they're like in a small town. Sometimes you see members of some churches, they don't want to marry, members of a different Christian sect. They have to come from that particular church. So by the third generation in a situation like that, that's when you'll begin to need to watch the genealogy a little bit. But they are still able to find unrelated people that they can have as a spouse. You understand? So, but in the polygynous population, however, it is a guarantee that by the third generation, if all the people living in one general area practice polygamy, all of the children will be so closely related that if they mate or find a spouse from that population, it is a guarantee that they will be inbreeding. So let's look at a real life situation involving Nick Cannon and his approximately 7 children, Future and his 8 children, and Mr. Demond George with his 33 or so children. Although they are not officially married to the various mothers of their children, they are practicing a de facto version of polygamy. So let's use the graphics to see what it would look like if they were all to live in the same pro-polygamy community and their children grew up knowing each other. Let's fast forward and assume that the children are now adults. They finished college, secured their career, and now they're ready to be married. Just like the unnamed polygamous community before, they decided to be monogamous, and now they're looking for that special someone. Now already you can see here that there are already more men or more boys that were born into this community who have now grown up to be men. So the women are outnumbered in this community already. Even if they wanted to be monogamous, there are not enough women. There's a bride shortage. So the next thing that you will notice, for those who decided to pair up anyway with members of the community, you'll notice that there will be a lot of siblings from one group marrying the siblings of another group. Additionally, you will see that there will be some people who are unmatched simply because there is not another unrelated person for them to be with. So this means that they will need to migrate anyway to a place where the genetics are more diverse, and that typically is going to be a monogamous community. This presents a lot of issues, which I'll go over in the next videos. So make sure you check my channels, click the like button so you'll know That helps the YouTube algorithm to let you know whenever I put out any new content. So, in summary, in today's video, we covered how the gene pool reduction, and specifically the bottleneck effect, is one of the outcomes of polygamy. There are also impacts to the different indexes that shape a society, from the political, social, economic, educational, health, and psychological impacts, just to name a few. Not only to the individuals within the polygamous communities or the polygamous communities as a whole where this is practiced, but even to the non-polygamous communities that are in close proximity to polygamous locations. Even they are heavily impacted. I will go into detail in my next video regarding these topics. So thank you for tuning in. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Until next time, take care.